Hello, and welcome to another episode of Killing the Church, presented by Alternate Media. Here where we talk about things that are killing the church and things that need to be killed in the church. Hello, Brad. How are you today?
I am doing spectacular. It's been a good day, and I'm excited about the show tonight.
I am too. We've got some really cool stuff in store for you guys. I'm super excited to get into it. And we both have completely different angles at which we're approaching this too. So I'm actually excited to hear what you have, and because we haven't actually really coordinated a whole lot. So this is gonna be cool. Anyway, I'm excited. First and foremost, I want to special thanks to our top tier Patreon supporters. This episode idea is brought to you by a Patreon suggestion. So once again, we thank you guys for the episode ideas and suggestions and things that you want to learn and cover. We got them. So thank you to all of our Talmudim and scholar level patrons. Patron. I can never get that right. You guys rock. That's the moral of the story. So let's get some of that background music going.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we the two messiahs. I'm sure some of you guys have already seen
the banner for it
of the episode. So you know what we're getting into. So before we jump straight into the topic, we have a tradition to uphold.
Yes.
What are you having tonight?
I'm trying something new. I have not tried this before yet. The Elijah Craig small batch. Yeah.
Actually, I first had that at synagogue, actually.
Did you really?
Yeah, somebody brought it to at the synagogue that I go to every Friday night after the prayer service. You go into the back and they have just people bring alcohol and stuff. It's great. It's a great time.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
I'm trying the this is called Drum Shambo. It's a single pot Irish whiskey, small batch. Really good stuff. I've had it before, aged in a Kentucky bourbon cask. So it's really sweet.
Very cool. I was going to say, so what you're drinking has been aged in the barrel that what I'm drinking was.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting law. Bourbon law is that you can only age bourbon in a virgin barrel.
Yes.
So you can only use the barrel one time. Now the Scots and the Irish were like, well, that's a good waste of perfectly good barrel material. Give it to us. And so
right.
they quite often take barrels from the Americans and are like, hey, if you're done with it, you used it for 4 years and that's nothing. So you got a solid 28 more years out of that barrel. Can we have it?
Oh,
all right. Ooh, that's different. All right,
yeah,
cool.
I like.
So, before we get started, also, those of you who are joining us in the tradition, please tell us what you're having, and if you have any suggestions, drop them in the comments section below. And a couple more things that we've got going on in the description of this video. I've got a couple of links if you want to join our Discord. That's it up here on screen. But if you're watching on YouTube and on Facebook, it's a clickable link in the description. So you can go that if you want to chill out with us and ask questions. I'm actually surprised at the diversity we have in our Discord server. We've got a little bit of everybody.
Yes. It's
really cool.
It's the kind of unity that really, I think all believers should be striving for. There's no reason that we can't all have a peaceful conversation with one another.
Yeah, Bobby he's actually in the chat.
Hey, good, so I got good stuff.
We joke with each other all the time. He calls me a heretic. But yeah, he's in the Discord chat and yeah, these guys can attest. We're there. We reply. You can ask us anything. Throw us in the lion's den. We're here for it.
Hey, Spartan Theology's on.
Yep. So cool. All right. Formalities out of the way. Let's start with Luke chapter 7.
Yes. This is always the best place to start this discussion.
I'm glad you agree, because we did not plan ahead of time how we were going to run this episode.
Yep, this is almost always how I start this discussion.
Yeah. Because this is so the idea of two messiahs, for those of you who are unfamiliar, and many of you may be, there is a concept we're going to further expound here later in the episode of two messiah figures. And Luke 7 is the most obvious point in the New Testament where this is something that matters. Like, knowing this information matters to the context. So I believe it starts in verse 18. And I'll read my version. I got the
TLV also.
Yeah, okay, so we're both using a TLV. Cool.
Yeah.
Luke chapter 7, verse 18. John's disciples reported to him about all these things. Calling two of his disciples, John sent them to the Lord, saying, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another?" When they appeared before him, the men said, "John the Immerser sent us to you, saying, 'Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?'" At this very hour, he was healing many of diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and he granted sight to many who were blind. And answering, he said to them, "Go report to John what you saw and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, those who have sara'at, or leprosy, are cleansed. The deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news proclaimed to them. Blessed is he who is not led to stumble because of me." Okay, cryptic answer, cryptic question. Why is that a cryptic question, Brad? Go ahead.
The most common one that I have heard preached, now granted, as arbitrary as the limited experience that I've had which is not really that limited in and of itself. I've been to enough churches to have heard this passage preached out of a number of times. But the most common sermon that I hear is that, well, John is in prison right now, and he's obviously depressed, and he is now having a crisis of faith. He's wondering if Jesus actually is the Messiah at this point. And that has never made any sense to me, because if we understand, if we take what we know of John into account, right? If we take it, especially if we take the earliest parts of Luke into account, when he was 6 months in the womb and leapt at being in the presence of the fetus of the Messiah, right? This is somebody who knew who Yeshua was before he was even born. Much less he's the first one who jumped up and pointed him out and said, "Yep, that's him. That's the guy," right? This is not somebody who's going to have a crisis of faith simply because he's depressed in prison, right? Or because, he's waiting for, Jesus to finally supplant the empire, as it were. No. I think there's a deeper question being asked here. And this is where the concept of two messiahs, or two messianic figures, becomes extremely important to the narrative, right? Because he doesn't ask, "Are you the Messiah?" The question's very specific. Is it you that we look for, or should we look for another?
Which again is, and so our version actually reads, "Are you the one of which we are to look for, or should we await another?" That again, we've stressed before. Unless you understand the relevance of the question itself makes no sense, and why it's worded the way that it is. And so the concept is there are two messiahs in the Jewish belief system. Well, basically, just, I guess we can get to the good part. Hey, Biddy's on.
Well, I think that this is a good. Hey, Biddy, what's up? So I think this is a good part to really get into the answer before we get into the rest, right? And I believe the references in the answer themselves are Isaiah 35.
Oh, when he's quoting
61.
Isaiah.
Yeah. Right. So let's turn there. You got Isaiah 35, 5 and 6, and I'll get 61, 1 and 2.
35. It's verses it's like 5 and 6, right?
Yeah, 5 and 6.
I'll read 4, and just to provide a little bit of context, because it might be important. Say to those with an anxious heart, be strong, have no fear. Behold, your God, vengeance is coming. God's recompense is coming, and then he will save you. Then the eyes of the blind will be open, and the ears of the deaf will unstopped. The lame will leap like deer, and the tongue of the mute will sing. For the water will burst forth in the desert, and streams in the wilderness.
All right.
That's 5 and 6.
So, the Isaiah 61 reference, verses 1 and 2a. The Ruach Adonai Elohim is on me, because Adonai has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of Adonai's favor and the day of our God's vengeance, to comfort all who mourn. So, those two are pretty unique with respect to one another.
I mean, so this is common practice just from the historian's standpoint. People would, they didn't have access to they couldn't carry a Bible with them everywhere like we can. And so they relied heavily on memorizing over and over and over Bible passages until the whole thing was memorized essentially word for word. And so it was very common to converse using verses because it's stuff that they have easily memorized. And so, in answering a question with a verse from memory, especially if you understand the context of the verse that you're quoting, if that has importance to the conversation at hand, which again, the question is, John is asking, are you the one, or are we awaiting another? And Yeshua's answer is not yes or no. Yeshua's answer is not I am this one or another. He's actually, his answer is more or less yes, both, kind of, in a way. But the what is it? I can't remember is it from Sukkah? No. You actually might have the reference that ties ties chapter 35 verse 5 and 6 with messianic prophecy.
I may.
It's fine if you don't. We got some stuff up here. It's fine.
Move on.
Yeah, no, it's good. So we'll start just immediately breaking down the two different concepts, and then we'll come back to Luke 7 after we put everything in its perspective. We will provide the background, and we will return to Luke 7 at the end of the episode, and everything should make sense. Essentially, that's how we're going to do this.
Right.
So the concept of two messiahs, they're commonly referred to, and there's multiple ways to refer to either of them, but usually you'll hear it in the form of Messiah ben Yosef or Messiah ben David. And Messiah ben Yosef is typically known as the suffering servant.
Yes.
And so he is the one that is to suffer and die. There are reasons why the two messiahs theory kind of comes about. There's a lot of parallelism within the Bible itself, but also there's a lot of problems with messianic prophecies that much of historical Judaism has agreed that this is messianic prophecy, but there's a problem. Some of these prophecies speak of a person who's going to suffer and die, and others talk of the same Messiah being, a conquering king.
And one who will reign for eternity at that. So there are inherent problems of logic and chronology between prophecies concerning a Messiah, right? Because you do have those that speak of a suffering servant who will die and then a king who will reign eternally. Logically, somebody who is reading this from a past point perspective is going to assume that these are probably two different people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural conclusion given the way that it sort of words. And there's a lot more to it than that as well. There's you get these dualisms, for lack of a better term, all throughout the Torah, and particularly with Israel and his 2 wives, right? And so there is who is the firstborn, and there's a little bit of this sort of recorded in, I think it's First Kings. The guy that he's not allowed to be in the line of Messiah, that king starts with a J.
Jehoiakim?
Yes. So essentially there are 2 possible firstborns, and so there are 2 possible lineages from Jacob that the Messiah could come from. And there's the passage before he loses the right to have a messianic figure of his lineage. It introduces the idea of a second Messiah possibility coming from his lineage, because he's from the 10 northern tribes, and then there's the 2 southern tribes, completely different setups. And so Judaism throughout its history has sort of had this sort of, well, there's like 2 separate kingdoms, so there might be 2 separate messiahs for 2 separate missions. There's maybe one who comes long before, and then another that comes after. There's tons of different theories that are out there, but generally speaking, there's a little bit of unity in that there's a suffering Messiah and then there's a conquering Messiah, for the most part.
Yes.
In fact, we were actually talking about this on our Discord at one point. Somebody asked about Messiah, son of Ephraim.
Which is another euphemism for Messiah, son of Joseph.
Yeah. Which I think I have it actually here pulled up. This is called Yalkut Shimoni. Yalkut Shimoni. And in its introduction, it gives you this idea that the reason he calls the suffering servant by the name Ephraim is because the tribe of Ephraim is associated with suffering. And so saying Ephraim, my righteous Messiah, is another way of saying the suffering servant. And so that was in our Discord at one point in a chat. I don't think we ever got around to actually answering that one before conversation moved on, but that's essentially your answer. It's the same thing. So you got some, but yeah, so proof, right? Do they actually teach that there are 2 different messiahs? We've got plenty of proof.
Yeah.
Go ahead and lead the way on that one.
Yeah, actually, it's amazing, kind of how much more you can learn just by doing a general search, because we didn't even look for very much, but there's just so much information about this that's there that it's easy to find. So first and foremost, yes, it's most commonly accepted that there would be two persons. However, there do exist teachings from certain rabbinic scholars that they would be within one person or one body, more or less. And so the first citation that I've got as support for that is Chaya Mahoran 6. I think we're starting in verse 2. Yeah. Which is kind of a big verse here. But let's see. He said then twice on Shabbos Eve, he said the Torah, Emtsuusa Da'alma Chaych. Okay, so where is the center of the world? Likutei Maharan, section 1, Torah 24, which discusses the 9 chambers. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because this is actually kind of beside the point here. Okay, so he said there are 70 nations, and they are contained within Esav and Yishmael. So the 70 nations are contained within Esau and Ishmael. One of them includes 35 nations, and the other includes 35 nations. In the future, 2 Moshiachs will conquer them, Moshiach ben Yosef and Moshiach ben David. In addition, there exists a tzaddik who encompasses both Moshiachs together. So that that's just again evidence that there exists at least some reference to both existing in one tzaddik, one righteous person.
Yeah, and the reason that's significant is because, again, for the longest time, the idea has been two separate messiahs that come at two different times.
Right.
But there have been a few rabbis who argue, and in fact, I believe if I use Sukkah, okay. For those of you who are Babylonian Talmud haters, I'm about to make you like this document a whole lot more. But there's this idea that existed even in Rabbinic Judaism that the suffering servant would actually be resurrected. And so depending on your school of thought, it could be that after the resurrection, it's the same Messiah and he comes back as King David. Or King David comes, King Messiah David comes and resurrects the previous Messiah and avenges his death. And that comes from the Babylonian Talmud, Sukkah 52, page A and B. And I'm just going to read a couple of things, just a couple of verses here. The Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who said that we lament for Messiah ben Yosef, who was killed, this which is written, and they shall look unto me because they have thrust him through, and they shall mourn for him as one who mourns for his only son. Zechariah 12:10. And actually, so this is explicit Talmudic verification that Zechariah 12:10 was considered a messianic prophecy, specifically in reference to Messiah, son of Joseph, the suffering servant. And then there's a bunch of stuff about the eulogy. There's actually this weird, not weird, this is neat little bit about the other interpretation of this could be that you're mourning for the evil inclination, that you write a eulogy for the evil inclination, because it dies in the end times. Yeah, and there's this bit like where to the righteous, the evil inclination will appear as a mountain, and to the unrighteous, it'll appear no larger than a hair on someone's head. So that at the end of the judgment day, basically each of them go, the righteous look up and go, wow, how were we able to overcome such a mountain? And the evil people look down and they're like, that's all that it was? How I let that overcome me? It's a really interesting story. It pulls out of Zechariah 8:6. But later on in the story, it talks about Messiah, son of David, coming back and resurrecting Messiah, son of Yosef, and avenging his death. And so there's some also parts on page B. There's a lot here, so you kind of have to search through and read the whole thing and find the parts that are relevant to the entire subject. But
I was going to say, furthermore on that, one of the sources that I got that again is very, very supportive of this, is from Kol HaTor, chapter 1, verse like 9, 10-ish. I don't know, the way they're divided is a little odd, but so it's verse 9. And so it begins, Yosef is still alive. The basic approach of the Gaon is encapsulated in the principle, Yosef is still alive, meaning that Mashiach ben Yosef is still alive and will live because, as it is written, every aspect of the beginning of the redemption is dependent on him. Thus, the decree regarding his murder by Armilus the Wicked will be canceled. So that Armilus the Wicked is actually, he's considered to be an anti-Messiah figure from the Middle Ages, but it's also kind of a euphemism for anti-Messiah in general, the concept of an antichrist.
Yeah, kind of like the abomination of desolation, right? That's a pre-antichrist figure,
right?
Antiochus Epiphanes. What I really love about the Kol HaTor, and for those of you who don't know, the Kol HaTor was written by a guy named the Vilna Gaon.
Yep. Or the Gra, as he's also known.
I'm going to put Vilna.
And so Kol HaTor is actually not by him in particular. It is written by one of his students, but it is a collection of his teachings from one of his students.
Kol HaTor. I'm putting it in the chat for those of you so you can Google it later.
Right.
Kol HaTor, it's available in Sefaria.
It is. Okay, so part of it, and I'll get up to that later because there's a citation that I found numerous sources referencing it, but I couldn't find it specifically in Kol HaTor. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Very well. So one of my favorite bits and pieces from the Kol HaTorah, actually, because I skimmed over it before the episode. Od Yosef Chai, right? Yosef is still alive, which I really like that saying because of the resurrection. Just saying, but it's from it's chapter Kol HaTorah 133. Od Yosef Chai, and a righteous person lives by his faith.
Yes.
Super cool. Like,
Yes.
there's really good stuff in here.
I was going to say, one of the next things I was actually going to get into while we're on the Kol HaTorah, I figure I'll get part of this out of the way. And I mainly cited this just, again, as further proof that there exists in Judaism a precedence for an understanding of these two messiahs and the two messianic figures. And so Kol HaTorah 1:2, let's see. Okay, so yeah, the Gaon merited being the light of Mashiach ben Yosef in order to promote the ingathering of the exiles and to reveal the hints in the Torah regarding the footsteps of Mashiach ben Yosef. He was therefore sent down from heaven. This is based on the words of Isaiah 60:22. The smallest will become 1,000. And this hints at the number 999, which is in the Sephira Yesod. So there actually is a lot of gematria in Kol HaTorah. Gematria becomes extremely relevant in Kol HaTorah. And let's see, the root of the Or Elyon at the high level of okay, hang on, I lost my place. But anyway, yeah, this again, we're seeing. I think it might have been farther down. There's a mention of the order in which they were to come. Oh, that was verse 1. That's why I'm lost.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a bunch. I mean, we have a ton of sources on like the role and who this person's supposed to be. There's a midrash that says the Messiah, or at the very least, his name was known before the creation of the world. Others would say that he was part of the created before the creation of the world. That particular resource actually comes from the Yalkut Shimoni that I was referencing earlier on Isaiah chapter 499. Let me see here. Where here, so by your light we will see. This is the light of the Messiah, as it is said, God saw the light and it was good. Genesis 1:4. This teaches that before the world was created, the Holy One, blessed be He, looked forward to the generation of Messiah and its deeds. He hid the primordial light for Messiah and his generation beneath his throne of glory. The Satan said to the Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe, for whom is the light that you hid beneath your throne of glory? He responded, it is for him who will ultimately refute and shamefully rebuke you. Master of the universe, show him to me, said Satan. He responded, come and see him. And as soon as he saw him, he became frightened and fell on his face, saying, certainly this is Messiah who will ultimately cause my downfall, as well as all of the princes of the idolaters in Gehenna. And this is there's a whole lot more to the story. Later on, just a paragraph later, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, Ephraim, my righteous Messiah, is his name. And so this is Messiah, son of Yosef. This is the suffering servant. He will increase his stature and the stature of his generation, illuminating the eyes of Israel and saving his people. No nation or language will be able to stand against him. And later on, where is it here? The pact that he makes. And he said to him, O Master of the universe, with a joyful and glad heart, I will accept upon myself your yoke. The Messiah then said to him, Master, excuse me, Holy One, blessed be He, Master of the universe, will this suffering last for many years? And the Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, by your life and the life of your head, I have decreed a week upon you. And then there's this conversation that's happening back and forth. And he says, I will accept upon the yoke on the condition that no one of Israel will perish, and that Not only those who live in my name, in my time, they shall be saved, but even those that are hidden in the dust and are not only the dead from my time alone shall be saved, but even those who died from the days of Adam, the first man, until now. And not only these, but even those who were miscarried in my time and shall be saved. Not only those who were miscarried, but even those who you considered creating but were not yet created. On these terms, I am willing to accept these, and I am willing to accept. Excuse me. And so, like, there's this interesting story here that's happening. It's a very mystical document, but it's giving you the idea that there's a suffering, right, Messiah, and
I found one awesome reference to something you mentioned earlier about the differences, about the relationship of Sarah and Rachel, the two mothers of the children of Israel here. That actually pertains to this, and that is the Kol HaTorah 1:2, which is according to the Gaon, all the work involved in the gathering of the exiles, building Jerusalem, and broadening the settlement of the land of Israel, so that the Shekinah will return to it. All the principles of the work and all the major and minor details are connected to the mission and role of the first Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef is the miraculous power who will assist every act done when the awakening starts from below in a natural manner, because he comes from the earth. Mashiach ben David, however, will come from heaven, as is revealed by the different aspects of Rachel and Leah, as is known reading the footsteps of the Mashiach and the revealed end. Mashiach ben Yosef himself is a composite of two aspects. On one hand, he is the son of Yosef. He is Yosef, the son of Rachel of the land. On the other, he is Yosef, the son of Jacob from heaven. So there's even an understanding that this son of Yosef, being of the earth, would still have some aspect being from heaven, and this is tied to his lineage from Yaakov in some way.
Yeah, there's also there's a few things you might find if you start digging in a little deeper of the concept of Metatron.
Right. So that is another thing. Is like, yeah, Kol HaTorah, in as much as it is tracking the 999 footsteps of Messiah, which, as I understand, I read through most of chapters 1 and 2. Actually, I read through most of chapters 1, 2, and 3. And it seems that the footsteps of Messiah is a euphemism for the time period of the exile until Mashiach ben David comes.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember reading that. I actually got that pulled up here. Yes, and there's a lot
that somehow the suffering is also connected to this. That that the suffering of this Messiah is intrinsically connected to the suffering of the children of Israel during this period of exile.
What is that reference that says the death of a tzaddik atones for sins? What is that?
Oh man, it's Moed Katan. Oh, I want to say 28.
We didn't even think to put that one in our notes for this. I totally thought of that.
I don't know why we would have forgotten that one.
But you got something from Sanhedrin 98. Is that right?
Yeah. So Sanhedrin 98b, starting in 14, actually, is where we begin to talk about Mashiach the leper.
Leper of the house of study.
Yes. And why would he be called? Why would he be called a leper? And so Chabad.org has a great video between this Rabbi Kaplan, Mendel Kaplan.
Mendel Kaplan, yep.
And I forget the other rabbi's name, but they have a phenomenal conversation about what the implications of Sara'at and the Messiah have, right? Because they first start by breaking down what is Sara'at, what is leprosy, right? It's not the leprosy we know today. Lou Gehrig's disease is not. Is it Lou Gehrig's disease or is it Hansen's disease? I forget which one it is.
Something different.
Yeah, it's Hansen's disease, I think it is. Anyway, that is not the leprosy that is biblical leprosy. That leprosy didn't exist in the biblical period. What is being described in the Bible is what Sara'at is cosmetic in a sense. It's not something that's biological necessarily. It begins on the wall of the house, more or less, and then once it does get to your body, you still don't have it until the priest has declared that you have it. It's like even though the evidence for the condition is there, it isn't actual until the priest makes it so.
Mhm.
Right?
That's right.
There's a number of implications that has, but one thing that they note is that it is a condition that seems to be unique to people who are righteous, righteous with like a minor lacking detail. There's like a minor deficiency, and that little bit that they can't seem to get over is what's causing, the leprosy. And so they take from that the Messiah, this Messiah, he's called a leper, not only because of the obvious implications of him taking on the sufferings of the people. This reference, by the way, Sanhedrin 98b, 14. This is important because there are many people out there who would say that Isaiah 53 doesn't in any way pertain to the Messiah, that it is solely about Israel. I'm not going to say that it's not about Israel. It certainly is, and I think that this is where Pardes becomes very important, because the interpretation applying it to Israel definitely fits, and I'm not going to discredit it in any way. But to make the bold statement that it's not about the Messiah is not exactly correct, because according to the rabbis in Sanhedrin 98b, it is exactly about the Messiah. And because this is the exact passage that they reference when they refer to him as the leper of the house of Rebbe, right? The house of study. And so that's another thing that's brought out is, okay, so why is he the leper of the house of study specifically? Why is it called that? And Seamus, you could probably explain that one.
Actually, no, I haven't seen the Moshiach halfways all the way through.
Oh, really? Okay. So I'll take that. Right. So again, right, this is somebody, the idea that Sara'at only affects people who have a minor deficiency, right? But there is a deficiency there. But specifically, he would be called the leper of the house of study. And what they come around to is this, that it would be a perceived deficiency among the scholars of his day, right? And the comparison that's made in the conversation is to like Einstein. Einstein was considered to be mentally deficient in his time, and that's just because he was so far ahead of his time that to the scholars of his own day, he seemed like a moron, because what he was teaching and what he was saying was so far beyond the scholars of his day that it came off as nonsense to them, because they weren't at a point where they could comprehend or grasp it. And so that's what they conclude, that this messianic figure would be, that he would be somebody that the scholars of his day would reject, because of the lofty level of his understanding. And this is where this Kol Hator reference that I have looked up this reference. It is not in Sepharia, because as far as I can tell, it seems to be quoting a Kol Hator chapter 5, and Kol Hator seems to only have 3 chapters.
Yeah.
But I have found multiple research papers and whatnot that cite this source, and they all cite it identically. But so the quote here is this, and this is attributed to Kol Hator, and it is regarding the effect of the Sitra Achra in the days of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? It says, how strong is the force of the Sitra Achara that he managed to hide from the eyes of our holy fathers the danger of the Klipot layers, from the eyes of our forefather Abraham, the Klipa of Ishmael, from the eyes of our forefather Isaac, the Klipa of Esau, and from the eyes of our forefather Jacob, the Klipa of Teraphim. During the footsteps of Mashiach, the Sitra Achra becomes even stronger in order to strike biblical scholars with blindness. So, again, I couldn't find where this quote comes from, but I found several places that cite it, where what is attributed to Kol HaTor is an understanding that the biblical scholars of the day of Mashiach ben Yosef would not recognize him. And there is another reference from Kol HaTor that I can pull from and I can cite, because I could find it, that also echoes this same sentiment, and it's Kol HaTor chapter 2, verse 39. Hang on, I'll pull it up. I've been talking too long. Say something.
Yeah, you're doing great though. It's good stuff. So I'm sitting here soaking it in and loving it. And I'm also kind of monitoring the chat to see if there's any questions. So far, nothing. But in summary, what I can do right now is essentially the Messiah, son of Joseph. What is his mission? What is his goal here? To be a prophet. It's the prophetic role. What we're looking for is, and I think back to the time when somebody comes to Yeshua and he says, "Hey, between me and my brother, help us divide the inheritance." And he says, "Who made me a judge over you?" This would be because he is not in the authoritative position as a king to do this kind of job. He's explicitly saying here that that's not my job, and that his time here is in the prophetic nature. And so he would act very much like a prophet. And this is very conducive of his message. You read his message, the Besorah, which is the good news in Hebrew, is the same throughout all of the generations of Hebrew scriptures, all the way from Joshua through to the end of the Tanakh. Repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. That is the good news, and that's exactly what Yeshua preached. So this is his prophetic role that he's stepped into. Go ahead. You sound like you got something.
Yeah, you're really gonna like this one.
Let's go.
Because it's going to sound again like certain passages that we would derive from the New Testament. So Yosef recognized his brothers. Right. This is Kol HaTor 2:39. Yosef recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. This is one of the traits of Yosef, not only in his own generation, but in every generation, i.e., that Mashiach ben Yosef recognizes his brothers, but they do not recognize him. This is the work of Satan, who hides the characteristics of Mashiach ben Yosef so that the footsteps of the Mashiach are not recognized and are even belittled because of our many sins. Otherwise, our troubles would have already ended. Were Israel to recognize Yosef, that is, the footsteps of Ben Yosef, which is the ingathering of the exiles, etc., then we would already have been redeemed with a complete redemption. This is something we've tried to get through to people anytime that a Christian brings up where Paul mentions that the Jews are blinded, right? And they never finish that phrase. He specifically outlines that they are blinded in part. Blinded in part to what? To the identity of Mashiach ben Yosef in this aspect, right? That is specifically what he's referencing. And the reason is this. He even says it's for the sake of the nations. It's for the sake of Gentiles that this is happening. Because if in his lifetime, right, if in the lifetime of Yeshua, every Jew in Israel automatically at that point accepted him as Messiah, boom, that's it. The end.
Yeah,
like,
you're done.
There is no hope for Gentiles at that point.
Which and again, I love that parallel, because you and I have made that parallel before in the past, long before we read the Kol HaTor chapter 2, because essentially our argument is, well, we say all the wrong things. We say this all the time to other Christians who are trying to talk to Jews. You're saying the wrong words. When you say, "I think that Jesus is the Messiah," you've already started off wrong, because he's not the Messiah. He didn't do anything the Messiah is meant to do. That's the conquering king Messiah. That's Messiah ben David. But while he was here on earth, he was Yosef, Messiah ben Yosef, the prophetic nature, his role as a prophet. And because you keep introducing him as the wrong person, he's unrecognizable to the Jewish people. You introduce Jesus, this Greekified, Gentilified person who taught against Torah, who told people to say that I'm the Sabbath now, so none of the Sabbath matters. Like, you've introduced this person in such a wrong way that his own people look at him and don't recognize him at all.
Joseph looks like an Egyptian, so his brothers don't recognize him.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly what it is.
Right. And so we've introduced him as an Egyptian. And so, yeah, of course they're not going to recognize him. And so we try to tell people to, like, be careful with your words.
Right. Well, and this is something that can even be derived from the New Testament itself, right? And this is something that I've looked through just to be double sure that I'm correct on this. And so far, I haven't found an inconsistency yet. But there are a number of times where Yeshua says, "My time has not yet come." Mm-hmm. As far as I can tell, every time he utters those words, he is being asked to do something that is characteristic of the Son of David, the conquering king, right? One of the Talmudic, and again, this is not even prophetic, right? And again, this further validates the Talmud in and of itself. One of the Talmudic understandings of what the Messiah, the conquering king, what he will do is the turning of water into wine. That's Talmudically prophetic. It's not in the Tanakh. And so when his mother asks him to do this, what does he tell her? My time has not yet come, right? It's not time for that yet. That's not the mission that I'm here for. That's not the office that I'm here to fulfill. Mm-hmm. He does the same thing when he is asked to go and celebrate Hanukkah with his siblings, right? Which that again is its own level of symbolism, with the story of Hanukkah being the reclaiming of the temple and whatnot, and the rededicating of the temple, the whole backdrop of the theme of rebellion against the oppressing regime, right? Again, what does he say? It's not time for that yet, right? So he almost blatantly denies being here to fulfill the role of the king multiple times in the Gospels.
Yeah, and his disciples are constantly asking him, "Hey, when are you going to redeem Israel? When is this kingdom going to come about?" Because, I mean, they're in the middle of the Roman occupation. Judaism at this point in history is in basically shambles, with the Sanhedrin and the state that it's in, with the leader of the Sanhedrin and the dominant party. Like, the world is coming down around them, essentially, and it's looking like Judaism has no hope for the future. And so this is prime time for Messiah ben David to come in, restore the nation of Israel, rule over the nations as the conquering king, and usher in the millennial reign. But he insists, I can't tell you. I don't even know when it's going to happen. It's not for me to do yet. My time's not here for that. That's not my office. He's constantly pushing away from this idea that I'm the conquering king right now. And so, you know, if nothing else, this is from our perspective and from the Judaic perspective, he's trying to push that this is his role as Messiah ben Yosef, that and that those answers come about once he dies, you know, and that whole episode happens. That's when people start to see it. His disciples start to make the two click. And you know, again, there's different theories within Judaism, especially nowadays, on the role of the suffering servant. But there's a lot of, from what we can tell contextually, archaeologically, that at the time of the first century, you know, within the early first century, they were waiting for the king Messiah. They essentially skipped over the part of the suffering Messiah because of how bad things were getting. And so there's a lot of evidence where, like, they just kind of, you know what, the suffering servant, that's not happening. Where instead it's going to be the king Messiah, because we don't rate the suffering servant. And so that was kind of the mindset, which is why people are constantly thinking, you know, when they do think that he is the Messiah, they immediately associate him with King David. And it's because they're not really expecting the suffering servant. And I've heard Rabbi Mendel Kaplan say in one of his lessons that he essentially said the same thing. He was teaching, I think it was Practical Parashah video. It's on Chabad.org. He's got a whole series, and I can't remember what episode it was, but essentially he said, we're not waiting for Messiah ben Yosef anymore. He's late. he said jokingly. Like, he's late. We missed him. And if he did come, we failed to identify him. So it's too late now. So now we're waiting on David. And that's the current mindset, even at Chabad, at least through Mendel Kaplan, Rabbi Mendel Kaplan. So, this is not something uncommon. The idea of the Messiah in Judaism is it's a thoroughly Jewish belief, with, and as is true with anything in Judaism and their belief system. You get 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 4 synagogues. You know how the joke goes. This is part of the context when going back into Luke 7 and really all of the New Testament. And once again, somebody brought up Torah apologetics. How you present Yeshua to a Jew, you have to be careful with your words. You can't say, I believe he is the Messiah, because you will immediately be shut down and turned off. The discussion's over at that point. You need to be specific with what you mean. And so you can say things like, I think he will be the Messiah when he returns. That's a personal belief that you hold. You can say stuff like that, and you can have that conversation there. You got something. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's worth mentioning there too, because we're not here to evangelize religious Orthodox Jews. That is not the mission of alternate media. Yes. This advice is if you so choose to have that discussion with a Jewish person, but honestly, I wouldn't. And the reason is this. Joseph decided himself when it was right for him to reveal himself to his brothers, right? His Egyptian servants didn't walk up to his brothers and say, hey, this guy is actually your brother Joseph, right? So that's not our place. That's something that will be revealed in his own time.
So we gotta, I don't think we can be any more clear about that at Alternate Media. We're not here to evangelize Jews, but we are going to teach Christians how to talk to Jews. Because if the conversation happens, if it comes up, and you want to be able to have this conversation, there are some things that you need to know. These are some things that you need to know, and also this provides a lot of context for the New Testament documents, which are thoroughly Jewish documents written by Jewish men, 100% in a Jewish context, within the frame and the scope of the idea that Christianity was called the sect of the way, which was a part of Judaism. It was not yet, but the New Testament is canonized, and then that Christianity breaks off and becomes its own religion. So it's not something that is ever saw itself as separate from Judaism. It was always seen as part of. And so you have to continue to read it with the Hebraic thought process, with the mindset of what's going on. And so that's what we're trying to do here is just show you some of these things that are important to the context in order to help you gain better understanding of what is happening, especially for those really confusing parts of the text, with Luke 7 being that. So, to kind of wrap it up, we'll wrap it up and then we'll go right to the questions, because you got a couple in the chat. John is not having a crisis of faith in Luke 7. He's asking, which one are you? Are you? He's asking, are you the one, or is there another? The one, I would say, is, are you the King Messiah? Or are we waiting for him still? And Messiah's answer is straight out of Isaiah 35, which is pertaining to, according to Sukkah 52a and b, that is in reference to the suffering servant. But he also quotes from another passage in Isaiah
61,
which is also in reference to, it's one of those where the whole verse is the first half is Ben Yosef and the second half is Ben David. Mm-hmm. And he sort of cuts off at the halfway point. So his answer in context is, I'm both, but right now I'm one. I'm this one, the suffering servant. And then he cuts off the verse and he says, don't lose faith because of me.
Right. And I think it's important to point out that it still makes sense. So, there's this distinction between Yosef and David in this aspect. And really even they have the same story, and I love pointing this out. Actually, the difference between Joseph and David is the part of the story that we get emphasis on, right? So with Joseph, we get a lot of emphasis on his days as a suffering servant. That's the majority of his story. But right there at the end, we get this brief little portion about him as practically the king of Egypt at this point, and a conqueror at that, right? Because of his economic policy, he was able to actually expand the empire. But that's just a little brief portion that we get at the end of his story. Whereas with David, we get this brief portion at the very beginning of his story where he's a suffering servant. He's least among his brothers, right? But then the whole rest of his story is nothing but his days as a conquering king. So even there, the typology between the two is present in both. We just get the emphasis on different sides.
I like that. I like that chiastic structure you gave there just then. That's good stuff. Very good stuff. So the two that now you guys know the two messiahs. So we tend to specify here at Alternate Media, especially in conversations with those who know. When we get asked about the figure of Yeshua, we say, yes, we think that he is Messiah ben Yosef, and that he rose and he will come back as Messiah ben David, but he is not yet Messiah ben David. Right now, in his intermediary period, he is our heavenly high priest. That's kind of the scope of how you would answer that question. So we got some questions. First one is Isaiah 53, blaming Rashi for redacting. This is an interesting bit here. Talmudically, Isaiah 53 has always been considered a messianic prophecy. Rashi was forced into a position where he had to debate Catholics. Because of this, he wrote a lot of his commentaries on things that Christians were commonly using all the time against Jews in order to try and not make it that way. So he wrote them under duress, is what I would say. I wouldn't say that. I would say that Rashi would have believed that Isaiah 53 is a messianic prophecy, but he wouldn't have admitted it because then he would have given a victory to the Catholics. And so that's kind of, it was under duress. They were forced into these debates. They were not. It's not their fault at all. It's not like, Rashi was like, screw these Christians. It very much was, I need something in order to actually win this. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And that makes sense in the time period he lived in. He lived in the earliest days of like the Spanish Inquisition, or even just slightly prior. And so, yeah, Jews were being forced into having debates with priests and whatnot. Against their will, and they were oftentimes exiled from their communities if they won the debate, and forced to leave, and or worse, right? That's the best case scenario.
Yeah.
2 Corinthians.
So I got it out here. I'll read it. This is the one where Paul says there's a veil. Verse 15. But to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their heart. But whenever someone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away.
I just read that.
You're aware of that. So, and actually, I think we did this in a previous episode where we talked about what that veil is. Or did we do that in the after party?
I think we might have done that in an after party.
Okay, so I read a lyric from Matisyahu. Yeah, I think it was in the after party. Go ahead and answer about the veil, though.
I was just say, yeah, the veil is, and I almost described it a little bit earlier today, right? Because in the video that I was mentioning earlier, with the discussion about Sara'at and Isaiah 53 and why Messiah is called the leper of the house of Rebbe, and when they start getting into real nitty-gritty detail about why this messianic figure would be considered deficient, why he would be considered even unintelligent, as it were, among his own time, the scholars of his own day and whatnot, why he would be an outcast in the scholarly community, right? It's the veil is this. When they really start to get into that kind of detail, you sit there in the back of your head like, there's no way they don't know. Like, there's
Yeah.
no way they don't know. Can you think of one Jew in history who's thought of this way?
Like when you were reading the Kol HaTorah, it's not likely that the Vilna Gaon was a believer, but you read the
No.
Kol HaTorah and you're like, how does he not know? Like,
You're like, how does he not see who he just described?
that's the veil. The veil is not, they don't know anything about their own scriptures. They read it and everything they think is wrong about it. That is not the veil. That is a straight anti-Semitic lie invention of modern Christendom and supersessionism. The veil is solely when they read Moses, they are unable to see that it is Messiah. That is the veil. That's it. They are unable to make that connection. And that is in no way meant to insult. This is Paul trying to figure out himself, how can they not see? And that's his explanation, because he has the same question we do. He's talking with his own brethren, and he's thinking, how do you not see these things that I see? And that's kind of his explanation. It's not meant to be an insult. He's not trying to say they're dumb. He's not trying to. He sincerely believes that it's only because God won't lift it that they can't see it. That's kind of his explanation to help him resolve the dissonance that he has in his soul, where like, how do you not see these things? And so that's the veil. It's not what you've been told by Christianity what it is. And one great example of this veil that I love to bring up to help illustrate this point, I'm going to read a lyric from Matisyahu. He's a Hasidic reggae, or at least he used to be Hasidic. I don't think he is anymore.
He's conservative now, I think.
But when he wrote this song, he was a Hasidic reggae artist, peyote and everything, and he wrote this lyric. I'm going to say the lyric and then try to think of, I think it's Mark chapter 2 or 3. What's this feeling? My love will rip a hole in the ceiling. Given myself to you from the essence of my being. Sing to my God songs of love and healing. I want Mashiach now. Time we start revealing. Okay. In Mark, a guy is brought who's paralyzed on his bed, and his four friends dig through the roof and lower him to the Messiah so that he can be healed.
That is Mark 2, yes.
And Messiah sees that their faith was great, and so he healed the man of his paralysis. So again, what's this feeling? My love will rip a hole in the ceiling. Given myself to you from the essence of my being. Sing to my God songs of love and healing. I want Messiah now. Time to start revealing. And it's, so I see that and I'm like, that's like straight up out of the New Testament. How do you not see that? That's the veil.
We got a good question here.
What you got? Which one?
Well, I can't highlight it, but it's the very last thing that was put in the chat.
What do y'all believe Melchizedek was?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I don't see any reason to disagree with the rabbinate on this one. According to most midrashim, as well as the Targum Jonathan, which is a first century Targum, Melchizedek was Shem, the son of Noah. Matter of fact, when Abraham first meets Melchizedek, right, king of Salem, in the Targum, it specifically reads that way. It says that they came to Melchizedek, who was Shem, the son of Noah, right? It actually specifies this. So the Jews of Jesus' day, this is what they believed. This is what we know, that this is what they thought about it, is that he was Shem, the son of Noah. Now, there a lot of confusion comes in when you add the book of Hebrews to it, because it mentions him being without
lineage.
Yeah, without lineage. That doesn't mean that he had no mother and father, right? That just means that his parents were unknown to the generation at the time, right? For instance, by our own standards, right? And I'll use a very hated but well-known figure so that everybody can actually relate to what's being discussed here. But the leader, I won't even say his name because I don't want the video to get flagged, but the leader, the political leader of Germany between 1930 and 1945, we don't know who his father was. Ergo, in biblical terms, for the modern age, he had no lineage.
Yeah,
we cannot prove that he had a father. You can say, well, he was born, so he had to have a father. And it's like, okay, why can't the same thing apply to Melchizedek? Obviously, he existed, so why couldn't he have a father? The idea is that Shem, at this point, was the last living relic of the pre-flood world, right? He is an ancient being who he came from quite literally another world. Nobody knows what the world was like before the flood at this point. Shem's the last one.
And with that lineage thing, so what the book of Hebrews is specifically trying to do is, because the Torah doesn't tell us exactly who Shem is, right? The oral traditions do, but the Torah itself leaves that information out. So you could say that with the written alone, you have no idea what his lineage is. Also, lineage could be meant to say that no covenant was made with him to be a priesthood, because he's not of the line of Levi, so he has no lineage to be a priest, and yet we know for a fact he was the high priest of early Jerusalem before it was called that. And so he's making this parallel with saying that even though our Messiah, who is of the line of David, right, who is from Judah, he cannot be a high priest, at least not according to the Aaronic priesthood. But Melchizedek also is without priestly lineage, and yet he was a priest. And so the Messiah is of Melchizedek's priesthood. It is making a parallel with saying that he can be a priest because a covenant was made with Melchizedek that he was allowed to be that. A covenant was made with Aaron, so he can't serve in the temple because he's not from Aaron. He's not a Levite. So he falls under Melchizedek's priesthood, essentially. That's the parallel that's being made, is he doesn't have lineage. Even if we know exactly who Melchizedek's lineage was, he doesn't have the lineage necessary to be a high priest, except in the heavenly court. And so that's what Hebrews is trying to do. It's trying to draw this parallel like a midrash. It's trying to midrash you into why we can still say that Messiah is the high priest in heaven if he's not of the line of Aaron. That's why.
Yep. We got a question about tzitzit.
Do we? Where?
Just above that one, actually.
Just above that one? Very true. Oh, I see it now. Yep. Thank you so much for the answer. Now I have a different question. Tzitzit with techelet or whites? We wear in Italy. In Italy, we wear them white. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the archaeology of the techelet.
So my understanding of it is this. The reason that white has been worn for so long is because the way of extracting the dye that was used to make the techelet blue, that knowledge was lost at some point in history, and it was uncertain as to how it could be done. And so rather than wearing the wrong shade of blue, they just opted just to wear white for generations up until recently, I guess, in Jerusalem.
So now this is, I guess, where the archaeology comes in from my side. There are actually two different accepted methods for getting the blue according to the archaeological record that we have. The most popular one is the Radzin. This is essentially a Jewish archaeologist who discovered these mollusks, essentially. And he's come up with what he believes, he's reconstructed the ancient method on dyeing the blue from these mollusks, these shellfish, essentially. There's another version. It's slightly different. It uses more sunlight. The other one has... essentially, there are two dominating theories based on archaeology. But what we do know is that we basically know how to recreate the techelet. And there's just a disagreement as to whether or not it's one way specifically with more sunlight or another specifically with less sunlight involved. And so most Jews in the mainstream, if the answer is, well, if we don't know, then we'll just, so that we don't accidentally violate the command, it's rather just wear the white because we don't know. And when Mashiach comes, that will be clarified. I personally wear the Radzin style techelet on my tzitzit.
Yep.
And it comes out after it settles in the wool for a while. It has like this bluish purple hue to it, which matches the descriptions that are given in ancient texts that try to describe the color of techelet. because the word Techelet doesn't mean blue. It says blue in your Bible, but it doesn't mean blue. And so I go with that. And actually, the Jewish community that I attend synagogue with, Orthodox community, there's a couple there who also wear the blue, the Radzin style Techelet. So it depends. You know, I would say honestly, there's really no wrong answer.
I would say that's a matter of conscience and conviction.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would say that, especially since the blue and and one of the guys in our chat can actually attest to this. It's very expensive to get the Techelet, and I've ordered mine from Israel. It's like $50 for 4 blue strings. So it's not cheap by any means, but it's the most accurate recreation of what we can possibly know from archaeology. So I wear it. I like it. I like it also that it matches with my talit is blue striped, so it kind of matches with the blue. But yeah, I would say there's no wrong answer. It's a matter of conscience. If you want to wear the Techelet, then by all means wear the Techelet. And there was another one. Okay, let's see this one. In the valley, eating bread and wine, which is a sign of covenant with Shem. A shadow of Messiah will be king, son of God, and priest. So I think we're looking for a clarification question here.
So what it sounds like he's asking, right, is the instance of Abraham, who was made a prince of God, right? Is that instance of him sharing bread and wine, which is a sign of a covenant with Shem, Melchizedek, would that be a prophetic shadow of Messiah being son of God and priest?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Moses is a better parallel.
Right. I'd have to think a lot more on that one and do a little bit more research before I could have an answer that I would feel comfortable standing on with respect to that one.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to make a better connection with Moses because Moses sort of was prophet, priest, king, like in a sense. And the Torah tells us Mashiach would be like Moses. And Abraham can easily be a prototype, definitely. There are many shadows of the Messiah in the Torah, which, by the way, is a good time to, again, announce our giveaway that we're doing.
Yes.
The bookshelf starter kit. And in the bookshelf starter kit, let me pull out a volume here. We have a full 5-volume set. Actually, 6-volume set, excuse me, because it has an appendices. A full 6-volume set of the FFOZ Torah Club Shadows of Messiah. It goes through the entire Torah, but with basically looking for the shadows of the Messiah in every single aspect of the Torah. Super, super good. This is my favorite set of all of the sets that I have. We also have the 5-volume complete set of the Tanya in the giveaway, as well as a bunch of other books and some other smaller giveaways that are being done in that. Easily, the grand prize giveaway is easily $600 and some odd worth of books. So let me see here. We got some problem children in the chat. No problem. Yeah. So if you want to be part of the giveaway, the only stipulation is you have to be a Patreon supporter, at least at the $1 level. Patreon membership starts at $1. You get access to exclusive content. You're part of the giveaway. The giveaway will happen on Purim, so it is a Purim giveaway. So again, with that membership, you also can join us in the after party. After these live shows are over, we go to the Discord and hang out with you guys, and you can ask us whatever you want. It's just you and us. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other perks that come with that at the Patreon level. Starts at $1, and you get the possibility of winning tons of bookshelf material.
And for Kara Conrad in the chat, who has asked, how do you enter? Subscribing to the Patreon is how you enter. There are a variety of different memberships at different prices. even at the $1 level, that constitutes an entry into the drawing. So, we're not discriminating in that aspect.
I do have an art scroll siddur here. And I do pray out of a siddur. I also, like I says, I regularly go to an Orthodox synagogue. And so I pray in the presence of a minyan out of a siddur. But yes, I do use an art scroll. This is an art scroll Sephardic siddur. I like this one. I also have an Ashkenazi version as well. I actually prefer the wording in the Sephardic version. I think it's personally, I find it more beautiful, I guess. I don't know what your opinion is. You're probably Sephardic in your nature anyway, so that
yeah.
But yeah, okay. And art scroll is beautiful. They really are the standard.
Yes.
All the books behind me in the middle shelf is all art scroll.
Yes, all that.
This is a good point. I love my siddur because I'm super ADHD and it helps me. This is a great point because I am also super ADHD, and there's nothing wrong with. I used to do this as a Christian. I used to write down prayers as a Christian. By definition, I'm still a Christian, by the way. But I used to write down certain prayers to remind, like at the end of the day or at the end of church, prayer requests come up and you write that stuff down so you remember it in your daily prayers. And I used to compose prayers and say them because if you say it with the same emotion and feeling and motivation, then the words you use really don't matter, even if they're the same words from yesterday. And yeah, the siddur is perfect. It's the same words that the disciples probably prayed. And then it helps me stay focused. It helps me not trail off and lose my focus. So I do love that point. It's a great point. But of course, in a postmodern age, for some reason, that idea, it becomes ritualistic, and so it's meant to be. It's bad now. Whatever. And we got a couple of people in here who love praying from the. I'm telling you guys, the siddur is it's really, really well composed. Even if you don't like the idea of praying the same prayer daily, read through one anyway. They're fantastically composed.
Yes. And it will, it will, at least for the curious, it will put you in touch with cultural Judaism in this aspect. You'll be more culturally acquainted with Jewish practice and Jewish religious practice, especially. The prayers are a huge part of their daily practice.
Yeah, I just just so you guys have like an idea. I'm just gonna read like maybe one or two blessings out of the 18 benedictions. It's called the Amidah for short, means standing prayer, or Shemona Esrei, which means 18 in Hebrew. This one's the blessing for repentance. Bring us back, our Father, to your Torah. Bring us near, our King, to your service, and influence us to return in perfect repentance before you. Blessed are you, Hashem, who desires repentance. After that is forgiveness. Forgive us, our Father, for we have erred. Pardon us, our King, for we have willfully sinned. For you are the good and forgiving God. Blessed are you, Hashem, the gracious one who pardons abundantly. There's what's the vinaigrette? This is my favorite one. The offspring of your servant David may you speedily cause to flourish and enhance his pride through your salvation. For we hope for and look forward to your salvation all day long. Blessed are you, Hashem, who causes the pride of salvation to flourish. If you read that blessing in Hebrew, you say Yeshua 3 times. So that's my personal favorite blessing. But I mean, these are good blessings. They really are a great guideline.
Yeah, my favorite actually personally is the bedtime Shema. Believe it or not, that's especially the portion regarding the invocation of the angels, protection and whatnot. That is, look, if you ever want to go to bed comforted, the bedtime Shema is what you need to read before going to bed, which that's what we do anyway. But definitely, and if you ever want to pray with your children before they go to bed, the bedtime Shema is definitely a good one.
Super good, and you fulfill the commandment of saying the Shema before you go lie down.
Yep.
Another one I really like out of the Shemona Esrei is the "My God, guard my tongue." This is a really good daily reminder to be humble. It's my God, guard my tongue from evil and my lips from speaking deceitfully. To those who curse me, let my soul be silent, and let my soul be like dust to everyone. Open my heart to your Torah, and my soul will pursue your commandments. As for those who rise up against me with evil designs, speedily nullify their counsel and disrupt their designs. And act for your name's sake, act for your right hand's sake, act for your Torah's sake, act for your sanctity's sake. May the expressions of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart find favor before you, Hashem, my rock and my redeemer. Like that, these are really, really well written. And I can't remember the source, but there's some of the prayers that are in the Shemona Esrei were written by Peter, like Shimon Kepha Peter, our Peter, the Peter from the New Testament. There is rabbinic documents that say as such that he helped write and compose many of the prayers that are prayed daily to this day in the Siddur. So, Rabban Gamliel, the rabbi of Paul, he is the one who instated that you should pray the Shemona Esrei thrice daily. So we basically know for a fact that the prayers written in this Siddur are the same prayers that the disciples would pray 3 times a day. So why wouldn't you want to be a part of that?
Right. We, especially in Acts chapter 10, we get an example of both Peter and Cornelius doing it. So we know that this, if nothing else, this certainly was for both Jew and Gentile.
Yeah. So, and we got a question on do I use tefillin? I actually don't have a set. I'm looking for a set that's really small, like the size that the Qumran community had.
Right.
Yeah, and they're really, really pricey. Also, I mean,
Very expensive.
In an Orthodox Jewish community, as a non-convert, I am not allowed to use tefillin. And out of respect for them, I'm not going to wrap tefillin, for morning prayers with them, because that would just be a big insult to them. So I'm not here to do that. But if I were to try to, I am looking for a set that's like a really nice small set. So because the words of the master, right, they make their tefillin broad and they make their seed long. So I'm trying to find small tefillin and small seed. So
yep.
All right. So
I'm gonna say I think that's a good place to call it. This has been a good one. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. I enjoyed studying for tonight, I think, more, but
when you read these stuff, you're like, wow. Again, that veil thing, like, how do you not see this? But
right.
But it's really good stuff. But anyway, hopefully this has provided for you guys some better context, some better cultural context, some better equipped to have a conversation. Hopefully this answers some confusing questions that you have about your New Testament studies. And I got a little bit left here, so I can still l'chaim in a second here. Last little shout out to our Patreons once again. Thank you guys. You make this happen. Your support here makes this episode happen. Everything you see, the design of everything that's going on here is all thanks to you guys. Even the episode ideas are thanks to you guys. So again, Hashem bless you abundantly for your generous donations. I don't think we can thank you enough. So thank you so much. But yeah, so with that, we will see you guys in the after party. Those of you who are Patreon supporters in the Discord. So until then, Laila Tov and L'chaim.